AI is incredible. It can teach you how to fry an egg and even write a poem, pirate style. Yarr! But it knows nothing about your work. Slackbot is different. It doesn't just know the facts. It knows your schedule. It can turn a brainstorm into a brief. And it doesn't need to be taught. Because Slackbot isn't just another AI. It's AI that knows your work as well as you do. Visit slack.com/meet Slackbot to learn more.
Welcome back to I Want That Too, the podcast where Disney merch meets Disney history. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and as always, I'm joined by the lovely Lauren Hersey on a very gray January day. Oh, what's the weather like there, Lauren?
It is a very gray January day here. We got some snow, got some ice going on, but I had a dream last night that I woke up and got on a plane and was in Walt Disney World. And I told Eric about it, and he was like, well, never say never.
Okay, well, all right. Looks like your afternoon could take an interesting turn. Mine is laundry. But anyway, so what have you dug up for us to talk about today?
All right. So on today's episode, we are talking about a casting announcement that isn't really about the movie, a Disney sale most fans don't even realize has two versions, and a 65-year-old film that suddenly feels modern again. And somehow, I swear, it all tracks and it all connects. And for today's feature, Jim is taking us back to that 65-year-old movie, because once you look at how the 101 Dalmatians came to be, you start to understand why Disney is still pulling from that moment today. But before we jump into it, let's thank our sponsor.
And this episode of I Want That Too is brought to you by our friends at unlockmagic.com, the go-to place for some of the best deals on theme park tickets. If Disney or Universal is anywhere on your radar in 2026, Unlock Magic helps you lock in great ticket prices without the stress. Handled by people who really know the parks and can help you save money. So if you're thinking, okay, maybe this is the year we finally go, head to unlockmagic.com to grab the best ticket deals and make that future trip just a little more magical. Okay, so you were teasing news about a casting announcement.
Yes, and this is one that I am personally, really jazzed about. I've said before, Eric does not do live action, but for this one, I am 100% in. So, coming from the live action pipeline, we're looking at Tangled has officially found its leads. Did you see this?
I did, but please, and again, it's been an interesting process. They actually had a bake-off between 3 different sets of folks. But tell the listeners who wound up with the leads in this thing.
Yeah, so it's Tegan Croft is going to play Rapunzel, and Mila Manheim is going to play Flynn Rider. And I'm not familiar with the woman, but I guess she's best known for her role as Raven on the DC Universe series Titans. And obviously, I know Milo. He was Zed in Zombies, which I love. So, what do you think about the casting?
Well, to be honest, these two, in fact, Milo Manheim is on my radar here because Nancy is a huge fan of Dancing with the Stars, and a couple of seasons back, I want to say he came in second. In fact, it was kind of controversial that he came in second. But yeah, the other thing that's worth noting about this, first of all, I know everybody talks about how it was supposedly Frozen, the Disney princess movie that, launched a franchise in theme park lands and yada, yada, yada. But I would argue that it was Tangled, the original, back in 2010, that really revived, the Disney princess franchise. And I would even say it's a better movie, than Frozen. But a lot of that was on the back of Rapunzel's relationship with who she thought was her mom, Mother Gothel. And we have some interesting news in regard to the casting on that as well, right?
Oh, do we? I don't know that news. Did they cast Mother Gothel?
Oh, no. Wow. Okay. This just
break
broke.
the news.
Okay. Well, I mean, early on, Scarlett Johansson was supposedly the front runner for this. And remember, she has a production deal with Disney. In fact, she's been working on a Tower of Terror movie for Disney. But for some odd reason, she fell out. And this is actually to the delight of the fan community, because they really had somebody they wanted very badly for Mother Gothel, and that was Catherine Hahn. In the WandaVision series, she was Agatha Harkness, the next-door neighbor, who turned out to be...
Oh my gosh, she is the best. She would be the best Mother Gothel. No wonder the community loves that.
There we go. And so that, and then, of course, she starred in the follow-up series, Agatha All Along. And so, just was the thing. It's like, well, no, we like Scarlett Johansson, but Catherine Hahn, it should be Mother Gothel. And just this past Friday, news broke that she is in negotiations for the role. So, So there we go. And but talk about who's supposed to direct and write this thing, because it is kind of an A-list group they've gotten together.
Yeah, it really is, and that's why I think I'm so pumped. So this is Michael Gracie, who previously did The Greatest Showman with the screenplay by Jennifer Caton Robinson. And the thing about this project is, if you recall, that it's been in development for years. Like, we've been hearing about this for a really long time, but it was paused, and like Disney was reassessing this live action strategy following, what kind of happened with Snow White. And maybe they were waiting to see what happened with the next one, which was Lilo and Stitch. And I'm just assuming, and maybe you can, clarify, but once it hit that $1 billion mark, they're like, all right, well, maybe we'll give it another go. Maybe that was a one-off.
Well, what's interesting about that, Lauren, is that if you're, realistically, the lesson that Disney took away from that was that, okay, so we shouldn't do live action redos of older animated features. That there was no interest in a live action version of Snow White, whereas Tangled, the interesting thing is you have this whole generation of young ladies who, again, that movie came out in 2010, so it's now 2025. It's been 15 years, and she was their princess. And so the notion of, a live action version of this, I am an adult, I am on board for that.
Yeah. And I think that the casting also, with casting Milo and the Zombies franchise being so successful and him aging out of that, you're getting both demographics. So you're getting people that are, in my age or around that, and like the last, 20 years. And then you're getting these younger girls who maybe didn't grow up with Tangled, but love Zed, So I think that it's smart casting, but what does this have to do with merch is the question here. So I think that this is highlighting a larger strategy that Disney has been refining for a decade, seeing what works, because we're talking again back in 2015, moving to, making the deliberate move to more go towards these live action adaptations of these successful films. And I think that distinction really matters, because these are tested ideas. They've already had one life cycle. They're not recreating the wheel here. So they have this proven IP that they're breathing life back into, and people are tied to these movies. So I'm just thinking from a merch perspective, they're definitely less risky. There's still some risk anytime you're creating something. I mean, we see what happened with Snow White. So, I mean, if these land, I'm thinking one of the reasons that they keep, going down this live action rabbit hole is because it eliminates a lot of the risk. And we know in today's business climate that every, dollar counts, and there's streamlining and streaming and AI and all of these things, disruptions in the industry. And I mean, there's been some real wins with this. I mean, do you think, Jim, that this ties to a merch strategy, or am I just making things up here?
No, I think honestly, I mean, in fact, it was always explained to me, from the earliest days with Tangled, that when, Disney Consumer Products began walking this around to various toy companies to the effect of, we're thinking of doing, Rapunzel. And they were like, yes, oh my God, we will sell so many dolls, because little girls will love to comb her very long hair. And, and that's going to hold true for little girls. And, well, realistically, folks, the current production plan supposedly is that by this summer of 2026, Tangled will be before the cameras, and realistically that means no earlier than holiday 2027, more likely summer of 2028. But yeah, get ready to walk through the Tangled aisle at Target, Lauren. I'm just saying, just sort of, yeah.
Heck yeah.
There will be a tidal wave of merch that goes with this.
Yeah, and with this one specifically, with it doing $600 million worldwide, and then remaining active through spin-offs and anniversary releases, I think this just feels like Disney is working smarter instead of harder, which honestly I could appreciate.
That as well. Though, what's kind of fascinating about this is the inference that somewhere behind this, because we've now arrived at Tangled being done live action. So, Lauren, I just have to ask, what's the over-under that within the next 5 years we see a live action Frozen?
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's definitely coming. I think it was probably, they had the Broadway show that they were getting in development. I know they have all kinds of stories on that. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder if they have a barometer or a benchmark there as far as, okay, well, we haven't heard about, Tangled hasn't had anything big in 5 years. It's time to put that back into the rotation. They say with fashion, everything old becomes new again. So I would say that with the third movie coming out, giving that a little bit of breathing room, but I would say you're spot on.
Well, there we go.
And I mean, if this land in Paris is successful, like World of Frozen, and they take that blueprint and they're putting that in other parks worldwide, I think that also makes a really good case, because you want to get people into the theme parks.
And speaking of which, I can't tell you who told me this, but yes, there is the Frozen Land that will be opening as part of the rebranding of Walt Disney Studios Park in Paris, soon to become Disney Adventure World in France this spring. But if you like that in France, you will also enjoy it in Anaheim, but not necessarily as soon as you want, but just be ready.
Well, listen, they got a lot going on out in Anaheim, so
they do.
We'll have to be patient for that, okay. But that will be fantastic. Okay. All right, so moving on here, talking about Disney is investing in what comes next. It also is actively clearing space for it. So we're talking about the Twice Upon a Year sale over on the DisneyStore.com. Mm-hmm. And I just have to bring this up. Don't worry, we're not talking about that sale, but it is going on now. It's fantastic. You're getting, 40 to 60% off on different items. And in addition, they are running different promos on top of that, different days of the week. So definitely check that out. But I'm bringing it up because I did not realize that there are actually, there are two Twice Upon a Year sales that it says it in the name, right? But did you know that there is also a Twice Upon a Year sale also happening right now? That is a D23 exclusive event. Did you know that?
Is this the one on the Disney lot at the actual studio store?
Yes, it is. Well, I did not know. So I was thinking maybe our listeners didn't know either. But so this is, I want to get the name right. It says D23 presents the Disney Studio Store Twice Upon a Year sale. So this one is January 11th. This one is sold out. But the version of this sale is different from what we're seeing on the Disney Store, just clearance. So at the studios, D23 members can get like 50% off Disney, Marvel, Pixar, Star Wars, all of that. And it's going all the way up to like 70% off on select styles. They have some new arrivals mixed in with the sale, and there is a ticket price. So each ticket also includes a $15 voucher that can be used at this event, which is probably why it fills up. But the reason I'm bringing this up is, D23 is on the brain because obviously the big D23 fan event is coming back to Anaheim this summer. And, they're probably going to see a huge spike in people, upping their D23 memberships. But there's more perks for D23 outside of just, being able to score tickets to that event. So the next one that is coming up is February 7th. It's also in Anaheim. And this one is celebrating the 25th anniversary of Disney's California Adventure. And there's like a deep dive panel. They're partnering with Imagineering, and they're going to take a look at, the last 2 decades of Disney California Adventure. So there's lots of things coming up on the event calendar for D23. So I would just encourage you, if you're interested in taking advantage of any of those things, to just head over to D23 and check out the event calendar, because there's stuff like every month, and especially those limited time merch drops. And that was like the one that was happening in Orlando that I, sold out last year that I missed. But, there's, the events, there's panels, there's experiences, there's merch. So make sure that you're checking that out as well.
Okay, and but we talked just on our most recent edition of I Want That Too about, you had put together a comprehensive list of all of the anniversaries that are coming up, and of course, this year, what is it, the 65th for 101 Dalmatians, and since we're a merch podcast, I guess we got to talk about the 65th merch coming from Dalmatians.
Yeah, and what's kind of wild about this, Jim, is this line dropped this week. So in between us recording part 1 of the 101 Dalmatian feature and part 2. So if we talked about it last week, you wouldn't have known about the merch that was for 101 Dalmatians. So what stands out about this collection is really about who it's for. It's not toy driven at all. This one is aimed squarely at adults. So Disney knows how to capitalize on their, Disney adult fan base. And I think this one leans a little bit more into, fashion and lifestyle pieces. It's kind of design forward rather than the original kind of kids movie. So couple standouts for me. First one that came up is there's this Dalmatian print jacket. I mean, you're seeing this in front of you. What do you think, Jim?
Oh, well, it looks like the Dalmatian film There's an alternate version out there, folks, where Pongo and Prita did not rescue the pups. Holy cow, look at this jacket. Wow, a definite Dalmatian print jacket right there, what Cruella always wanted.
Yeah, so I'm like, I have the description here too. It says, copy Cruella's style with a fur coat of your own. The soft jacket features a dog tag zipper so it is really something. It has a turtleneck collar and puppy print interior lining. And this is actually coming from our friend Brandon at Cakeworthy.
Brandon.
Yes, Brandon. Okay. So this is $90. And if you're into that bold style, go get you one.
Wow.
Yeah. So the other one that I actually really do love, I am a sucker for anything black or black and white. Like you're looking at my cell phone case, it's a black and white. Yeah, so I love black and white. So this is a Spirit jersey, and it is half black and half white. This is another Cruella de Vil inspired item. You've got her on the right corner breast of the Spirit jersey, and then on the back you get the Cruella in big block letters with the puppy print as well. I personally love this. It is $79.99, and I would totally wear this tomorrow.
What I love about this is burying the needle in the exact opposite direction. This is not celebrating the heroic mom and dad Dalmatians who rescue, not only their 15 kids, but all the other puppies that are kidnapped. This is celebrating the Disney villain. Wow.
Listen though, but Disney knows what sells merch.
I guess.
And I mean, as there was a sweatshirt and a Spirit jersey that did have the puppies. Or maybe this is just me highlighting what I like, but it does lean heavy into Cruella de Vil, who I think is one of the best villains. But I think that the design focus of this, it's not an accident as to them leading into this adult fashion. And, because when Disney's 101 Dalmatians came out, it didn't look different from other Disney films, but it did represent a major shift in how Disney approached animation and production, which brings us full circle here right into today's feature. So after the break, Jim is going to be finishing up part 2 of how Sleeping Beauty led to 101 Dalmatians. But first, this.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire wrong. So our orders get all backed up. We're drowning in paperwork, then actually drowning, careless fighting off sharks with a stapler, and pirates are pillaging the office copier, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant goes beyond the resume, using unique insights to deliver a smarter shortlist. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
Okay, we're back. And Lauren, on last week's show, we talked about the devastating impact that Sleeping Beauty's serious underperformance at the box office had on Walt Disney Animation Studios. And just to remind folks, Sleeping Beauty cost $6 million to make. It was in production for 8 years, and it only took in $5 million. And as a direct result, when the company filed its annual report the following year, Walt Disney Productions was forced to report a net loss in the fiscal year 1960. And Lauren, just so you know, that was the first annual loss that Disney had to report to its shareholders in a decade. And that was back before Cinderella had been such a huge hit for the company in 1950. And there were consequences. When Sleeping Beauty was at the height of its production, there were 551 artists and animators working at Walt Disney Animation Studios. April of 1959, pink slips went out, and 3/4 of the studio's staff was laid off. And just so you understand, folks, that means there are now only 75 people working. And people in the building are like, how the hell are we going to make full-length animated features with so few people working here now? And by the way, a quick side story here. You may have heard, Lauren, that, back when Disneyland was originally being built back in the mid-1950s, Walt supposedly couldn't decide which character he was going to theme the castle in the middle of his family fun park around. And there were a couple of ideas on the table. There was talk of naming it Robin Hood's Castle, because Disney had just put out a live-action version of that story, the story of Robin Hood and His Merry Men, that was released over in the UK in March of '52, then started playing in the States in June of that same year, '52. There was also some talk of naming this structure King Arthur's Castle. Disney had held the rights to The Sword and the Stone since 1939, and Walt had really been wanting to do something with the stories about King Arthur's childhood for more than a decade. And then there was the obvious choice, naming the castle at the center of Disneyland after the princess who had started it all, and that was Snow White. So, all right. Okay, so the weird bend on this story, Lauren, is that someone working in Disney PR convinces Walt that, look, it would be far better for the company, long range, if at the castle at the center of Disneyland wasn't hyping a movie that the studio already made, but rather if we're promoting something that would be arriving in theaters soon. Which is why, rather than naming the structure after Snow White, it would be a far better play from a publicity point of view to have this building named after Sleeping Beauty Castle. And you work this side of the street, Lauren. What do you think about that argument?
I think it's short-sighted. I think that, Disney fans do not like when you make changes, so when you're locking in, it's forever.
Okay, well, so, but again, the thinking here was, and I love this argument. The notion is whenever Disneyland would come up in conversation, supposedly what was going to go on here is, oh yes, the castle in the middle of the park, Sleeping Beauty, that movie that's coming out in '59, and I have to remember to buy tickets for that, because of course that's how we all talk about it when we talk about theme parks. And anyway, okay. After Sleeping Beauty released in theater in '59, Walt really isn't happy that, every time he goes to Disneyland, he looks at the end of the street and it's like, oh yeah, I named it after the movie that lost me $1 million. It's
like getting a bad tattoo.
No, that's it exactly. All right, so Walt decides to do something about this. And now, mind you, there's a way that Disney likes to tell this story, that in the early 1960s, shipping crates mysteriously show up at the Disney lot in Burbank. And inside are these beautiful 3-foot-tall sculptures of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which have been donated anonymously to Walt Disney Productions from some sculptor who lives in Italy. And as the story goes, Walt is so taken by these statues that he turns to veteran Imagineer John Henson and says, we have to find a place for these things over at the park. So John comes up with the idea for the Snow White Grotto and Wishing Well, which totally by coincidence, Lauren, gets built right next door to Sleeping Beauty Castle and opened to the public in April of 1961. Okay, it's a lovely story. This is what actually happened. There was no anonymous, artist who sculpted these things and then sent them over, donated them to Disney. Walt himself contacts Italian artist Leonardo Parma and personally commissions these things. Not only that, Walt wants them made out of Carrara marble, which, just so you know, Lauren, this is the same stuff that Michelangelo sculpted his statue of David out of. All right, so this is the good stuff, Lauren. High quality Italian marble, usually white, blue, gray, with some subtle gray veining through it. And so Walt deliberately has these things placed to the right of Sleeping Beauty Castle next to the hub in a grotto-like setting. He also has a replica of the wishing well from the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs movie built between the grotto and the castle to further Snow White's claim to the structure next door. And when Walt speaks at the dedication for this Disneyland edition in April of 1961, he says that the Snow White Grotto and Wishing Well is dedicated to the children of the world, and that any coins that are tossed into this wishing well will then be collected and distributed to various children's charities. In fact, by the way, today, the bulk of those funds are donated to Make-A-Wish, a very worthy organization. But Walt closes out his remarks by saying he hopes that all of the wishes made at the Snow White Grotto and Wishing Well really come true for the children of the world. But Lauren, I'm betting if you were listening closely that day, you would have also heard Walt, under his breath, say, "I really wish I had named this castle after Snow White instead of Sleeping Beauty." So anyway, I asked John Hench about this once. I figured, given that he was the Imagineer who actually worked with Walt directly on the Snow White Grotto and Wishing Well project. So if anybody's going to know Walt's specific thoughts on this matter, it's going to be Hench. And John, well, he was a diplomat, didn't say anything directly, but he did point out a few interesting things. Like, for example, back in the 60s and the 70s, there was a plan at Disney Studios in regard to how they released or re-released the Disney full-length animated features. There was a set pattern, Lauren, that every 7 years a Disney animated feature would be pulled out of the vault and sent back into theaters with the thinking that every 7 years, there was a new generation of kids who had not seen a Disney animated feature, and their parents would then feel compelled, well, I don't want my kid to miss out, so let's take him to the theaters to see Snow White, Pinocchio, Cinderella. You get the idea. John was quick to point out that Sleeping Beauty first released to theaters February of 1959, so 7 years pass. And it's now February of 66, and it's time for Sleeping Beauty to get re-released to theaters. But that stays in the Disney vault, Lauren. John pointed out that, well, you have to remember Walt was still alive at that point. In fact, we didn't lose him till December 15th of that same year, 66, and he was still kind of ticked off about all the time and the money that the studio had spent on this Disney Princess movie that hadn't connected with audiences. So in the vault, Sleeping Beauty stayed. In fact, it wouldn't be for another 4 years, June of 1970, that Sleeping Beauty finally gets sent back into theaters. And what was interesting about that is this, you think about it, it's June of 1970. They are building Walt Disney World down in Florida, which has gone from a projected cost of $100 million to $400 million. And at this point, the Disney company is literally lifting up couch cushions looking for additional sources of money. It's like, how are we going to pay for this damn thing? And it's just like, wait a minute, Sleeping Beauty is still in the vault. Send that back out into theaters. See if people will pay to go see that. And by the way, also worth noting, what also gets sent out into theaters in this exact same window of time, Lauren? Fantasia, which when it was released to theaters in November of 1940, also lost the Disney company $1 million. But again, making money is the intent of the Disney company in 1970. Saving money is the priority of the Disney company of 59 and 1960, and how they will specifically do that, we will get to in a sec. But first, this. And we're back. Okay, Lauren, so again, top of today's feature, we're reminding folks about the layoffs at Disney Animation in April 59. 3/4 of the staff let go, leaving only 75 artists and animators. And it's just sort of like, how are we ever going to make these movies with such a small staff. And, especially when you think about that, some of the deepest cuts were actually in the inking department, the folks who actually would take the hand-drawn drawings and then transfer them to pieces of acetate, and then they'd be handed off to the painters. It's like, what are we going to do? Those people are gone. And it's like, well, there's this interesting new technology called xerography, which involves copying an image using electrostatic printing through photography. This, by the way, was invented, Lauren, by American physicist Chester Carlson and was patented back in October of 1942. Now, the interesting thing, when you think about how many of us have printers in our own homes these days, all right? But, so Carlson begins walking xerography around to American industry, and initially they don't get it. It's just sort of like, we got a mimeograph machine. Why do we need this thing? And so it takes till, this astounds me, the first commercial copier doesn't actually go on sale to 1960. All right, so that's 18 years of going, you should have one of these. And like, no, we're good. But on the other hand, Walt always pays attention to new technology. And he looks at xerography and he immediately gets, okay, this would have an application for animation. So he agrees to give it a shot. But he's not willing to commit to a full-length animated feature right out of the box. It's like, let's do a short. Let's try a short and see what happens. So they do a film called Goliath 2, which actually gets released to theaters in January of 1960. In fact, it's sent out with Disney's live-action Toby Tyler, or 10 Weeks with the Circus. And in fact, I got to talk with Kevin Cochran once, the star of Toby Tyler, and he was fascinated because he was like, oh, you want me to voice a character? Okay, sure. He would walk off the live action set and go into a recording booth and, who is this? This is a tiny elephant? Okay. But anyway, they send the short out into theaters, Lauren, along with Toby Tyler. And the interesting thing is it's an entirely new production process, but the public doesn't notice. They look at it and it's like, well, that looks like a Disney animated short, like the ones I've always seen, and I enjoyed it. And so, all right, sure. And so they couldn't tell that the cells that were used in this thing hadn't been hand inked. On the other hand, Walt could. And Lauren, this may surprise you again, given we were talking about the wonderful design and the look of the 101 Dalmatian merch, especially what Brandon Cakeworth did. But Walt did not care for the look of 101 Dalmatian. But on the other hand, he knew that the thing I built up, my feature animation studio is hanging by a thread here. I have to let this go forward. I have to see, how audiences will react to this. But now it's like, well, which movie are we going to make? And remember earlier I talked about how Disney had the rights to T.H. White's The Sword and the Stone. They'd had them since 1939. And they'd actually done quite a bit of work on that film. But it was Bill Peet who raised his hands and said, no. We do not want to do another castle movie. Remember Sleeping Beauty, all right? We don't want to do a fairy tale. We need to do something modern, something that's a distinct break from Sleeping Beauty. So it needs to be a story that's set in today, and more to the point, he was like, look, Lady and the Tramp, 55, that was literally at the top grossing film for that year. Let's do another dog movie. People love dogs. And, so they turn around and they look through, well, what have we optioned? And it's like, well, we have that Dodie Smith book, 101 Dalmatians. We bought that back in 56, but we're going to be doing that for the TV show, a two-parter, right? It's like, nope. In fact, if anything, this would be a perfect demonstration of what xerography can do. Because think about it, Dalmatians, all of those spots, we won't have to draw them or paint them. They'll already be on the dogs, if we use this technology. But that said, Lauren, to sort of bring things back to what you were talking about earlier in the news portion of the show, the one thing that everybody agreed had worked in Sleeping Beauty was Maleficent. And, of course, Maleficent was done by master Disney animator Mark Davis. So they turned to Mark and said, hey, you did such a great job with Maleficent. And if you read the Dodie Smith book, there's this woman, Cruella de Vil, who's the villain of the piece, sort of a fashion maven. Can you do anything with that? And so Mark goes off, reads the book, starts putting together some designs for the book. And everyone, if you talk with everyone about 101 Dalmatians, they'll talk about how actress Tallulah Bankhead was one of the inspirations. Likewise, Academy Award winner Bette Davis. But I got from Mark himself, one afternoon, was visiting at his house, and it was 5:00, and Mark was serving the strongest cocktails I've ever had in my life. That in fact, I say this as now a 66-year-old man, but never drink with 60-year-olds. All right. First of all, they've been doing it for decades. They're professionals. And they will serve you a drink that will knock you on your ass, and it will have no effect on them whatsoever. If anything, they're 3 or 4 drinks in before anything hits them. But anyway, over cocktails, I start quizzing Mark about Cruella de Vil, and he, a drink or two and says, well, she was a real person. And it's like, what? No, she was. She was in fact, she was a friend of ours, of myself and Alice's. Better yet, she was one of the wives of the other 9 old men. And I immediately, it's like, who? And Mark, to his credit, never actually sort of, would cop to who it was exactly, though he did sort of infer that it might have been Mrs. Milt Call, who evidently was a very colorful, loud character. But never came straight out and said that. But I was always, so I've always wanted to find out, learn more about her, to see whether or not, what he sort of hinted at was true. But anyway, back now, it's January of 1961. Here's the big roll of the dice. Will 101 Dalmatians save Disney Studios? We know this much. They were able to get the film made for 2/3 of the budget of Sleeping Beauty. It came in at $4 million, goes out into North American theaters and makes $14 million. It's the 8th highest grossing film of the year. And Lauren, it does in fact save feature animation at Disney Studios. That said, Walt still does not like the sketchy xerography look. In fact, he pulls even further back from feature animation, and really starts concentrating on the parks and Epcot, the city, and that sort of thing. Because it's like he just doesn't recognize the animation that his studio is making anymore. And the interesting thing is the animators decide to test him on this to see if they can get his attention. So I'm just going to put this out here, folks. If you look at the very next film that Disney Animation Studios made, Sword in the Stone, and then take a really close look at Merlin's eyes and his nose, and then compare them to Walt, that's who he is. All right. They literally modeled the look of Merlin after Walt. And he never noticed. And by the way, animators do this all the time. There's a very famous story about The Incredibles at Pixar and how Buddy or Syndrome, the villain from the first Incredibles movie. The guys who were working on the movie actually based him on Brad Bird, the guy who was directing the movie. And Brad, to his credit, when they were about, a third of the way into production and screening the reels and that sort of thing, at one point the lights come up and Brad was like, I know you're basing this guy on me. But on the other hand, it works, so I'm willing to let it go. But the one other story just this week that broke about Incredibles, Lauren, I think you'll enjoy this. Jack Black has been out doing work, doing publicity for that remake of Anaconda, and he recently did an interview about how he was offered the opportunity to voice the role of Syndrome and Buddy in Incredibles, and he said, "I was such a moron. I asked them to rewrite the role for me, and they turned me down and they went with another voice actor. And says to this day, that's the one thing I regret. It's like, I could have been Syndrome. I could have been in a Pixar movie and I turned it down." But anyway, there we go. That's how from Sleeping Beauty's disappointment at the box office, we wound up with 101 Dalmatians, which in itself became a franchise for the studio. And maybe on a future installment of I Want That Too, we'll discuss what happened next with 101 Dalmatians, the live action Dalmatian films with Glenn Close. And I think we just talked on the last show about the Cruella prequel with Emma Stone and how there appears to be a sequel to that prequel in the works at Disney even now.
Yeah, so it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving here.
There we
but
go.
Now in our next episode of I Want That Too, we are switching gears, but we are still going to stay in the arena of anniversaries and animals. So look out for that. But on that note, Jim, I do think today it's time to close up shop.
Okay, I can see that. And by the way, folks, if you want to keep up on everything across the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, please follow us on social. And don't forget to check out our Patreon for bonus shows and early access.
Yes, and if you have a question or an idea for a future episode, we love to hear from you. Shoot us a message. Jim's at jim@jimhillmedia.com, and I'm at laurenhersey.com.
And if you like the show, leave us a quick rating or review. It helps other Disney fans find I Want That Too.
Well, that does it for today's episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on I Want That Too.